Well, cool. Mr. Jordan Rose, thanks for coming on Analog Dialogue, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Brody.
Yeah. So I start out every episode with the same question. I always ask, for anyone watching who's never heard of what you do, could you describe your presence in the arts industry?
Sure. I am a full-time drummer based in Brooklyn, New York. I consider myself a studio or a session drummer, meaning I do recording sessions for artists, for musicians, and I go on tour with different artists and also play on Broadway shows and do local gigs around New York City. And that is really what I do. I play a lot of drums.
Yeah. Sweet. So yeah, so I was reading that you played on Broadway, like in Dear Evan Hansen,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So what do you like about playing in pits?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the show, and I haven't done a ton of shows. Dear Evan Hansen was the first show that I did on Broadway. I had done a couple of musicals, growing up and high school and college and stuff. Um, and I always kind of enjoyed it because it's different. It's the environment is fun. I mean, I enjoy watching musical theater. I always have. Uh, it's a different thing. It's different than playing, you know, with Theo Katzner or something. It's a totally different way of approaching uh, what I do. I feel like there are similarities too, but um, I don't know. I mean, with Dear Evan Hansen, the music is very like pop music based, and so it's a really fun book for drums. There's a lot. I get to really groove. The band is great. They're all musicians that I would play with, whether I did Dear Evan Hansen or not. So it's fun to just go in and play with really great musicians and play good pop, Broadway style songs for sold out shows every time.
Yeah.
Because that's a hit show, so the energy is always electric in there. And I also, I like Broadway offers stability in a career where sometimes stability is not always as hard to or as easy to come by, as some other career paths. Just because you can, if you have and to clarify, I just sub on Dear Evan Hansen. I don't. It's not like my gig, but when Broadway's happening, I'll do it probably 10 times a month or something when I'm in town. So it is, enough. It makes a difference. But what I'm trying to say with the stability thing is, if you have a Broadway gig, or even if you just sub and sub a lot, it's a good paying gig, and it's in town. You don't have to bring any of your gear. You just show up with your clothes on your back. Everything is there, even the drumsticks. You play the show and you go home. You sleep in your own bed. Um, and if you have the full time gig, then you're introducing benefits, and it becomes kind of like almost like a 9 to 5 job, but you're still playing music, and depending on the show, hopefully really enjoyable music. And but there's also an element of flexibility because you can sub out half of the shows and still have the gig. So, let's say you're the drummer for Hamilton, you can play that whenever you want, as long as you do half of the shows. And
Mhm.
then you can go on tour with whoever, go on tour with Brody Smith, go on tour with, whoever that opportunity arises, and get that touring in and that experience, and come back and have
Mhm.
a stable gig.
Yeah. So when it comes to like the gig itself, do you prefer pits or like playing in clubs?
Oh, I mean, that's a hard question to answer because, again, I feel like it's just a different thing. Like, there's things I
Mm.
enjoy about playing in the pit. I enjoy that no one's looking at me.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I don't, so I can literally, put my foot up on the bass drum. Like, when I'm not playing, I can, if like on Dear Evan Hansen, there's like a couple times where I have like a 10-minute break where I don't play in between songs.
Yeah.
And so, I might pop open a book, or something, and I'm in like my own booth up there, separate from the rest of the band there. And the rest of the band is actually visible to the audience. They're up on a riser. And then the drums
Okay.
we're in like a booth up in the air. We have to like climb a ladder to get into
Okay.
it. And so we call it like the drummer's tree house. And so, that particular show, I just kind of like it, you know, it's low pressure in certain ways, but other ways it's high pressure because you have to nail this,
Yeah.
every note you play, because it's the show is relying on that. But whereas playing in a club, it's a totally different thing. You're feeding off the energy of the crowd. It's, more improvisation, depending on the band you're playing with. And so I think in a perfect world, a mixture. I don't think I'd be happy only doing Broadway for the rest of my life. And
Hmm.
and I don't, you know, I mean, yeah, it's hard to say, because it depends on who you're playing in the club with. Maybe I would be happy playing
True.
with someone every night in the same club, depending on who it was. But
Yeah.
anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is I really like the diversity. And like, some nights you go play on Broadway, some nights you go play, wherever, the bitter end. Some nights you're on tour for a month, and whatever. I like kind of switching it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think it is about places like New York or like Nashville or LA that make them so magnetic when it comes to when it comes to music in particular?
Yeah. Well, I think for whatever reason, these have just become music hubs. Uh, and so, however that reputation happened, I don't know exactly. I mean, I guess we could go back and look at the history of why these cities attracted musicians, but I think just over time, there's just a larger pool of musicians that have gravitated towards these areas. Uh, and so I think that just, you know, more people doing things, there's just bound to be more of a scene. The chances of cool things happening are bigger because more people are throwing stuff at the wall, and certain things are going to stick, and
Yeah.
be, you know, and be the cool thing that's happening. So,
Yeah. Do you consider yourself to be part of a scene?
um, yeah, in a way, yeah, I think so. I, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
What like
yeah, I think it's kind of fluid. It kind of changes, and
mm,
I feel like I kind of, bounce around in a couple of different scenes. But yeah, I think I'm definitely, maybe a different word for scene would be a community, part of a
sure.
musical community.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess yeah, what kind of role does that musical community play in what you do then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, I learn a lot from the people in this community that I've kind of found myself in, just from living here. Just it just kind of happens naturally when you go to the same places and you see the same people, and then you become friends, and then you start making music with them.
Yeah.
And but seeing just what people are doing, what's inspiring them, it's bound to have an effect on whoever's within that community, having those conversations or seeing those shows, or just being in those venues where the music is happening. Um, so yeah, I would say it definitely, uh, I always kind of go back to my first couple of years in New York. I've been in New York almost 9 years, but when I first moved here, I was like out hearing music like every night. My roommate, this guy Eric Finland, an amazing organ player.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, me and him, we would just go out every single night and go to a lot of nights we'd go to multiple different places. We would go to one set, at the living room, then we go to Rockwood, then we go to the 55 bar, and then we go to the Bitter End for the jam session that starts at midnight and goes till 4 a.m. And then we would go home and we'd get up and we'd practice. And I had a little random like job that I would do a little bit to like help me pay rent. I would do that for a couple hours, then we'd do it over again. And I was in New York like 6 months before I ever had a gig in New York. Like it took a while, and that first gig I had was like not a good gig. It was like this dingy little place. Nothing against the people who play that gig, because there were some great musicians, but it was, I think I got like less than $100.
Yeah.
But of course I did it because I was like, oh my gosh, someone asked me to play a show in New York City. That's why I came here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, like we've talked about that before, right? Like the sort of
mm-hmm.
like the things that, or the boxes that like a gig should tick off for you to take it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that sort of I've really taken to heart, and started to kind of try to be selective with what gigs, well, not necessarily be selective, but like try to see what is this gig contributing to what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because you were saying, is it a good hang, is it good music, or is it good money, right?
Right.
It's got to be at least two of those three things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if it's all three, then hey, it's a no-brainer.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I found that to be super helpful, so thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Well, thanks to the person who passed it on to me. I can't remember who it was, but
yeah,
I thank them.
yeah. So, but you've collaborated with a ton of different musicians. Of course, I mean, like with Theo Katzman and Corey Wong, and I saw on your website like Charlie Puth as well, and then more recently Jacob Collier too.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you've learned or like taken away from collaborating with so many different artists?
I mean, that's a great question. It's also, I feel, it's every artist is so different. But I would say there's, at least in the artists, some of the ones that you've mentioned, there's also some similarities, and that's that they're all just extremely passionate and they just love what they do. And and that really goes into the music that they make, and that's really inspiring to me, because sometimes when your passion becomes your job, sometimes those lines can get blurred, and sometimes it's more on the this is a job side, and you forget that you love it, because you're trying to pay your bills or whatever it is, and it becomes more of that grind. But working with those type of artists reminds me, like, they're successful because they've been able to keep that, that fire, that passion, that love of what they do, of the art of music, foremost in their journey. And it just, shines bright. There are other artists I know that sometimes that's not the case, where maybe their priorities are different, and they have, success, whether it be fame or money, like if that's how you define success. But, just the ones that you've mentioned, Theo and Corey and Jacob Collier, and even Charlie Puth. Like Charlie Puth is, I would say he's the most mainstream out of the people that, we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But he has retained that music nerd side of him, because he's a jazz pianist. He went to Manhattan School of Music for jazz piano, and then he started making covers, pop covers, and just slowly blew up and became an amazing songwriter. And but like if you when you follow him on social media, like you can tell, he self-produces everything. Like, uh, and you can just tell he's still got that curiosity and that excitement about what he does. And so I really
Yeah, yeah,
respect that. He hasn't lost that, even though he's got this, high level of mainstream fame. But I worked with him before he blew up. I was like, we were playing together because he transferred to Berkeley. That's where we met. And then we did some shows after college. He already had some, internet, YouTube virality or whatever, because he was on Ellen, and that, bumped him up. But he wasn't like mainstream when I was playing with him. Then he moved to LA, and like 6 months later, he wrote the song for Wiz Khalifa, that they did with Wiz Khalifa for Fast and Furious.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
what is it? See you again or whatever. It's been a long day with it,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
that was his first hit. And since then, he's just been on the top of the charts ever since, which
yeah,
is cool to see.
yeah. Well, I mean, you've clearly taken a lot of that into your own playing, because I think you're a super like emotive drummer.
Thanks.
um and like I mean, like you like, and like you really elevate the emotional intensity of the songs that you're playing on.
Thank you.
So what is there something that you like that you tap into, or like what allows you to sort of play in that way?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's a goal of mine, is to, to do what you said. So that means a lot to me that you observe that. Um, I mean, when I'm playing songs, I always, want to know what the song is about. I'll often ask the
Yeah,
songwriter, like if we're in a recording session, before we record it, I'll just say, hey, tell me about the song. Like, what's it about? And, sometimes you can know what it's about from the lyrics, but I'll still ask, because a lot of times there's like a backstory. Every once in a while they're like, oh, it's just a silly love song or whatever. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that's still good information to know. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, actually it's a metaphor. It sounds like it's a silly love song, a simple whatever. I'm not dissing love songs, but, and they'll go
no,
into something and I'll be like, wow, I'm so glad I knew that. Like, um, because I feel like that can really inform how we play, and,
mm,
the the emotion we put into it. And um yeah, I don't know. I feel like with music, um I've always just kind of been drawn towards uh like stability of groove. And I think it comes from my personality. Like, my personality is, I like to just kind of have everything in order, like even the things you can't see. Like, I want, the attic, I want to know that there's organization. And if I know that something's out of order, then it kind of weighs on me. You know what I mean?
huh,
Um, and so I relate that to music, um, because I feel like having that groove is like being organized. But at the same time, I kind of like pushing those boundaries. I also like rhythmic dissonance. So sometimes, like when I take drum solos, I kind of just like to make it be kind of like the world is falling over, like, kind of like tumbling down a hill. Because
yeah,
then when it comes back, you don't know what organization and, stability feels like if you haven't had, the opposite of that. And
yeah,
so I don't know. I just kind of like how those two things, I feel like I try to incorporate those in, in my playing or whatever. But I don't know if that made any sense.
yeah. No, it does. It does, totally, totally. Because yeah, you're totally right. Like you can't appreciate the, like the more positive experiences without having had those negative experiences, um,
Totally. Yeah.
or the opposite of experience, if we're talking positive and negative as opposites, right? But yeah,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, yeah. And then what about your the funky times stuff that you've got going on Instagram? It's been a little while since those have come out, but I've
Yeah.
found that, like, with each rendition, like the quality is just like like vastly improved every single time.
Thanks.
No, like, and I don't mean like necessarily in the groove or anything, but just like the well, I guess that sounds bad too. No.
The groove has gotten worse, but the video quality has gone
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. No, I guess what I'm trying to say
I
is like
I get
there's,
what you're
there's,
saying.
yeah, like there's more detail, whether it is like the video or the audio, but
Sure.
what what role does like has home recording played in your career?
Well, that's been more recent. Um, a couple years before the pandemic, it was a goal of mine to build up a home recording setup, and so
Yeah.
I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people, and I invested in some good quality recording gear. And I dabbled. I'd have some engineer friends come over. They'd help me set up the mics.
Hmm.
We would do some stuff, but I never really felt confident to, spread my wings and fly in this area. Like, I didn't even know how to set up the mics. I was always nervous, like I was going to do something wrong. And there's a lot that goes into recording, and I'm still learning every day. But um, once the pandemic hit, I had the space, which was, very grateful for that. And I had the gear. And so literally like the first day of quarantine, I woke up and I said, you know what, I'm just going to go set up my mics. And even though I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm just going to try my best. I'm just going to like mimic what I've seen my friends do, and just, cause I can't invite them over, we're
Right.
all isolated. Um, and I'm just going to record something. And I did. And I was like, oh, this is all right. Sounds okay. And I was like, and I was just going to put it out as a groove, just like post something just for fun on Instagram. But then it hit me. I was like, oh, what if I invited people to layer something on this? And the name Funky Times came about because we were living in funky times, and it was a funky groove. And so I was like, okay, I just put it out there, and kind of a little bit nervous. Like I didn't know if anyone was going to take to it, but sure enough, handful of people asked for the files, and some really cool collaborations came from it. And so gave me a little bit of confidence, and I did it again. And, I did, a couple weeks in between each one, sometimes a couple months. And then like every time I did it, I feel like you're saying, the quality went up, because in between each time I did it, I was also like starting to record for people. Like, I did a lot of just collaborations. Like there, other people like, oh, can you record I'm doing this cover song. Like, can you just record it and take a video with your iPhone? And then that started turning into paid work. It's like, oh, can I pay you to record this? And it's been a year and a half, I guess now. And it's started to become like a part of what I offer. I feel a lot more confident in the recording side of things. I've upgraded my gear over time, moved to a new space that sounds better. Of course, there's still tons of headroom to grow, but I feel like I'm at a base level where it's like, okay, I can record, and it's going to be, a certain quality. Like, of course, if we went to Abbey Road, it's going to be better, but like, this is what I can offer you. And,
Yeah.
so anyway, that's, I'm just excited to keep growing with that. I feel like I really enjoy it. And, I just feel like this is something that, and I'm starting to see it now with gigs coming back. It's like, oh, this is cool, because I can go to the studio, record a song, and then go play a gig at night. And it's like, whereas before I was just playing a gig at night. So now it's like I've got more kind of going on. It's a little bit more income. And again, like we were talking about earlier, the variety. I like, I like having the variety of doing the studio, doing the live stuff, just kind of having different things going on all together. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what, like, as you've sort of been like growing and expanding the stuff that you're doing, um, like what has been like the role of um uh like gear, like how's gear sort of played a part in this? Because like I see like you're often like, you know, selling off old stuff, but like, you know, and then acquiring new stuff, but it's
yeah,
still like it still sounds like you, and it still
thanks.
sounds like it still sounds really really good, like, but like it's all new, it's all new gear, right? So do you have like how does this all work, man?
Oh man, that's so funny. Well, I have a problem. I have a gear. I have a serious problem. You heard it here first, folks. I have a serious gear problem, um, and I'm working on it. Uh, because what you just said, it's like, oh, you could have a totally new setup, but it still sounds the same. Like that's the point. It's not the gear, like
Yeah, yeah.
gear is fun, but it's really the musician, like uh I, yes, I do believe that, but I mean, kind of going backtracking a little bit, I also do think that gear does, it inspires you to play different ways, and like obviously, you can kind of kind of fine tune your sound with different mics, different drums, different drum heads, whatever, different preamps. Um, but at the end of the day, like it really depends on how you play. That's what's going to get picked up. Um, so where was I going with that? Yeah, I mean, gear is just kind of fun, it's, yeah, how some people are just like into, I don't know, watches. Like, I don't know, that doesn't interest me, but like old snare drums interest me. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, it's like, okay, I'll sell this ride cymbal that I haven't used in a year, and then I'll buy this snare drum,
yeah,
and it'll entertain me. And it's like, maybe I love the snare drum and I keep it for a long time or forever, or maybe I don't, and then I sell it.
yeah.
It's kind of just this. It's almost more entertainment and an addiction, to be honest. Like it's. I kind of compare it to like gold mining. It's like, it's just like what could be on the other side? Like
Mm.
what if I find that super rare, vintage drum set for $40 at this pawn shop, you know, which is, I waste a lot of time on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. And, right now I have like 5 things that I'm like considering. Like I'm talking to the guy or the
Yeah.
girl, and I'm like, should I pull the trigger on this? Like, yeah. Anyway, I hope my wife doesn't watch this. No, no, she
Oh,
knows. She knows about my problem. So
yeah,
we're working on it together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear it's not just guitarists that have problems with gear.
Oh yeah, I think drummers
Yeah,
and guitarists are definitely the most intense about it, though.
yeah, yeah. So when you think about like when like going back to sort of when you were starting out as a musician, was there something that drove you to like become an artist, or decide that you wanted to pursue music?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a progression of things, but there were a couple of defining moments. Um, I remember I had a band with my oldest brother when he's 5 years older than me. So I was like 12. I was in middle school. He was in high school. And like, so I felt cool, like being the drummer in his band, because all his friends would come and they were like older, like cool older kids, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
neighborhood. And, uh, but I remember being in that band, and this kid named Ethan Kennedy, who's still an amazing musician. He lives in Austin, Texas, but he was super talented back then. Like he like joined the band, and that was a big deal because he was like a local, like, music icon, in our little circle,
Sure, yeah.
and so I really looked up to him and learned a ton playing with him. um but I remember one day after practice, I don't remember how it came up, but I remember where I was standing. I was in my garage next to our trash can, like putting away my, dingy little drum set. And I don't know, I might have asked him like, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" or something, Well, I don't know. What do 12-year-olds talk about?
Yeah.
And anyway, the point is, he was like, "Oh, well, are you going to be like a professional musician when you grow up?" And when he asked me that with like so much certainty, like that was a viable career path to take, it just like really hit me, because before that point, I had never considered music as a career. It was always like,
Mm.
just whatever I saw people in the community do, whatever. Like my dad's an accountant. It's like, oh, that's a job. You're an accountant. Or, we had a friend who was a chiropractor. It's like, oh, I could be a chiropractor. Or, you know, like I didn't have anyone in my life that was a professional musician. So I was just like, oh, this is something that you do for fun. But when my friend that I really respected said that to me, I was like, whoa, I guess I could do drums for a living. And then I started, reading, and I started subscribing to the Modern Drummer magazine and reading about the journeys of different drummers who were professionals. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. They kind of started out like me, and then they like went to school, or, they moved to wherever, LA, New York, whatever it was. And so over time, it just kind of built upon that. But that that was the first time that it hit me that it could be a career. So yeah, but there was a couple other defining moments. I had a struggle with my hearing when I was about 10 years, or more than that, when I was like 19, 20, where I lost hearing in one of my ears. And so kind of battling that, and, going through that, it was about a 2-year stretch of time that really gave me the conviction to do music. Like, it kind of, that's a long story, but going through that trial, I guess, again, it's like,
Mm.
the opposite. It's like when you lose your hearing, it makes you realize, how much, how grateful you are for it, when it comes back. Because I was able to get most of my hearing back through modern medicine. But so some experiences I had with that kind of led me deeper down this path, down this journey as a musician.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so what about, like you said, obviously, like that person really influenced um your sort of perception of what you can do in the arts. But do other like disciplines of art ever sort of like you know make you, or I guess influence you, or inspire you to try something different?
Hmm. Good question. Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, my wife is a really talented creative, and so, she's opened my mind to different mediums of art that I'd never really investigated before meeting her. And so definitely learning about different things. Like, she's really into architecture, and so whenever we visit a different city, we'll try and find like a famous architectural house or building and take a tour of it. And so I've really enjoyed that and learned a lot, like the process of the architect, and like why they did this. Like Frank Lloyd Wright is a big influence for her. And one thing that he always does is he uses compression and release. So like he'll make the hallways in his places that he designs like really small, like low ceilings and kind of tight feeling, so that when you come into the living room and the ceilings are tall and there's more windows, um, you have this emotional reaction to it because
Hmm.
you felt confined, and then whoa, it's like, I made it to this place, and you want to stay there,
Yeah.
and so learning stuff like that, it's like, oh man, I want to be an architect, like that's so cool, but that that does inspire me with drums. It's the same thing, like the dissonance and the release,
Yeah.
uh type. That's just one example, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like musically or emotionally or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever it is, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then what about your creative process? Could you sort of, like, we sort of touched on it with, getting to hear what the if you're doing a session, like what the songwriter sort of has in mind when it comes to that. Um but what about if it's something that like you're sort of in the room as the tune's being written or something, and or as something's being put together? What's your creative process like?
Yeah, well, as a sideman, I haven't really worked on my own music. um I feel like my creative process has to be kind of fluid and support the creative process of whoever hired me.
Mm,
um so everyone's different. And so I kind of just try to be flexible and um just kind of go with the flow. Like sometimes the artist will come into the room in the studio and will want to just play everything like acoustically and try and get a feel for it. um and then we'll start going and recording, and so I'll just try different grooves. I'll usually start simple, but sometimes if a weird idea comes in, like, oh, let's flip this backbeat, and not just do this kind of more standard beat or something. And
mm.
you can just kind of feel it. Sometimes, you just try and read the people, and some people are very like decisive, and they're like, yes, that's it. And it's like, okay, great, like awesome. And some people are like, they don't say much. They're just like, okay, yeah, this is cool. Let's like go do a take. And so like I'll keep kind of exploring. And
Yeah.
sometimes you leave the session and like you still don't really know which take they liked. It's like because that's their process. Their process is record a bunch of
Sure.
things, and then I'm gonna go dive through this, and spend time later on my own, like making this. Like everyone has a different way of producing their music. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah,
Nice.
so it kind of changes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to thank you for, for taking the time to chat with me today, man. Um,
Of
you know,
course.
you've been like, we've chatted back and forth a few times. You've been, you know, really responsive and like a huge mentor to me. So, just want to thank you for doing this and
Oh
coming on.
man. Well, man, thank you so much for hitting me up. And if you guys haven't checked out Brody's music, definitely take a listen. I really respect what you do, man, and it's great to glad we connected. The internet brought us together,
Yeah.
and this is really fun. Thank you so much for having me on. Feel free to edit out any nonsense I was saying and all my ramblings. And if you want to do a take two and just start over, uh, then just let me know.
Yeah. So where can people find what you do, man?
uh, Instagram, I would say, is the main place. Jordan Rose Drums. I do have a website, just kind of some basic information on there. So yeah, and then you know, find if you're in New York or whatever, if I'm on tour, can come meet up in person or whatever. So
Sweet.
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. We'll chat soon.
All right, man. Thank you so much.